Hello, everyone. In today's video, you don't need a frontier model for everything. I know, right? Sometimes you don't need the smartest model. You just need the right model for the right job. I, for example, use small local models on my old gaming computer here at home to run a real financial research system that can work 24 hours a day. So what kind of job can a small, dense model do, in this case, all day on one RTX 4090? So we're gonna go ahead and take a look. What I'm talking about here is pulling company filings from Edgar and analyzing them. More specifically, pulling and analyzing the KPIs inside of those filings. Now I'll explain what that is in a sec, but first let's start from the beginning. For some context, if anybody is not familiar, basically in the United States, public companies have to report their results to the government, to an agency called the SEC. This involves telling the whole world what they did and how they performed during the quarter. So this data is all public, okay? It's out there. There's no paywall. But the problem is extracting it from hundreds, thousands of pages of corporate verbiage and accounting jargon into something that you can actually use. So we'll take another step back here. Maybe you're wondering, what the heck is a KPI? Basically, it is a metric that companies track to tell them how certain business operations are going inside the company. And they can be many different things, and they vary from company to company. It can be, for example, the number of customers that a company has in a certain geographic region, or the percent by which something grew, one of their products, how it grew every month or over the course of the quarter. So while things like top line revenue or something that you may find in one of the normal 3 accounting statements, those will tell you how much money a company made, for example, but a related KPI can give you some insight into how exactly that money was made. Now, some of you who are smart are probably watching and saying, hey, I can use something like regex or text matching or something to do this. And to that, I say maybe, but I've been doing things like that for a while. And I'll tell you that you end up having to put in a lot of rules and exceptions and things of that sort. And you always kind of have something a little brittle that you have to do a lot of upkeep on. When you do that, there are things that can happen that aren't ideal. For example, companies will change the name of the KPI. How annoying is that? But LLMs, as you can imagine, work quite well for stuff like this. And we're on local, and this is important to me, and it doesn't cost me very much, so why not? Now, the things from the 3 accounting statements are pretty ubiquitous online for free. You can find them, so I don't usually extract that stuff. But the big data companies, the data vendors, have started doing KPIs in the recent years, and they're still milking it, okay? They're charging quite a bit of money, especially if you want to get it as an API so that you can get like a fire hose of it. So for example, here I have Costco warehouses, which I believe my head's covering it a little, but you can see demonstrates how many locations where you can go and shop Costco is building. Now, if you've been to a Costco, you know that it's a zoo and you feel like you're at like a Taylor Swift concert or something. There's so many people there, which maybe can explain why they keep building more and more warehouses. The latest data point is 2025 and how in 2000, it was at 350. So you can see the progress of how they're growing their locations. Another example here is Uber Trips, and I'll move this so you can see it a bit. I believe this covers the rides and delivery. So it's not just 13 billion rides, but it's quite a lot of trips. If you want to know how a company is doing, if it's predictable, if it's growing year after year, so that you can make an investment and put your family's wealth into it, it's really good to know this kind of information. So as I said, it could be quite difficult to do this and automate with simple keyword searches and regex because the KPI name might change. The name might vary across different filings, different time periods. The values could be either in a paragraph or in a table. And just to put it succinctly, it's a good use case for me because I don't have to rewrite any of the rules or exceptions, okay? Just reiterating that so we're all on the same page here. So as an example, Uber has something called trips, right? And we saw how it was growing in the chart before. So Uber will publish their filings and it'll say stuff like this. Trips during the quarter grew 18% year over year to 3.9 billion, driven by monthly active platform consumers growth of 16% and monthly trips of MAPC growth of 2%. Okay, so what we can see here is that there's multiple related metrics in one sentence here. So you could find every number with regex, but understanding which number represents what is the harder part. Now imagine you have to do this for thousands of companies, okay? It becomes very time consuming and resource intensive, and you're probably not going to get it right. I'll give you another example here. Consider that sometimes companies will give you an actual results, and then they also provide guidance, okay? If you do any sort of stock research, you know this. It'll say something like gross bookings grew 24% to 58 billion. But then a few pages later, they'll get to guidance and they'll say gross bookings of 58.25 billion to 60.25 billion. Now, do you see the problem here? These are gross bookings numbers, but one is a guidance figure, okay? These are numbers that management projects. It's actually imaginary. These numbers haven't happened yet. It's
a fake. It's fugazi, it's a wazi, it's a woozy, it's a fairy dust.
So now you understand what I'm trying to do. So what does this project look like? Very simply, it kicks off a pipeline and it goes and it gets the filings from Edgar. It downloads them to disk. This is a pretty straightforward deterministic process, hard-coded. We just have to download some files. Then we have to know what the actual KPIs we're looking for are. There's actually two ways of getting the KPIs, just to make it robust. First, we run a scrape to find mentions of the KPIs that people have been talking about on Reddit, on forums, on blog posts, etc. And then we use the filing itself and have the LLM quote-unquote discover KPIs in the filings and figure out what sort of things we might be interested in tracking. Now, these steps are all to create a catalog of KPIs for a company. The next step is to retrieve a passage that matches the sort of thing that we're looking for. And there's a couple of steps here. There's an LLM, but there's also a text re-ranker that does some matching and it figures out what we might be interested in. What it does is it saves that chunk in the surrounding text that may contain the important data, and it answers where in this big filing is the data that we want. And then an LLM actually extracts the particular data points that we care about. Finally, because filings can have data points for many different periods, we just go ahead and deduplicate the data so that everything is nice and normalized. And then if we choose, we can have it create a chart, which is how I'm able to visualize it. It's very helpful. So it's pretty straightforward. I'm going to put an example here on the screen so that you can see what's happening. It's really not that exciting. There's really not that much to see. It's basic text processing, I guess, but it's very useful. Now, you could actually turn this into a skill. I personally don't use them that much with agents because I generally look at the charts that are created and I can very quickly see if I'm going to be interested in something. And then I like to print out the reports and read the full thing, etc. So to wrap it up here, the reason that this is a suitable use case for local models is that you are processing quite a bit of data, thousands of filings. And you can do all that without needing the greatest model that's ahead on all the benchmarks that everybody's raving about and that's super expensive. Local feels really nice for this because it's not expensive and you don't get that token anxiety, right? You know what I'm talking about. When you do this, there's no meter running, there's no usage limits, and you don't have to pick and choose which company you might be interested in based on which one you kind of get a vibe from. You just kind of do it for everything. So now I have this enormous repository of financial data of many different companies that I can use to get some really good insights or even ask an LLM to give me insights about. And I don't need to use GPT-69 or whatever to do this and have to pay for tokens for all of eternity. And that's been the basic thesis of the last few videos that I've made on this channel. This data is incredibly valuable to me, and every incremental improvement there is in open models just makes my system better, and it's quite awesome. It was not possible to do something like this just a few years ago for an individual at this scale. Now remember, it really is the infancy for local models, right? Big labs have been building their infrastructure for a decade. They've got trillions of dollars being invested into this. They got all of the smartest people and all the hype around it. Even governments are backing them, but open models are becoming more in demand. The local scene is growing. I see a lot of the momentum building. And in the year of our Lord, 2026, maybe stuff like this that I'm doing could be the ceiling with a lot of the setups that we have. But in 2030, we're going to be able to do something insane on a 4090 or whatever version of the 4090 we have in that year. Just remember, not that long ago, just a few years ago, you could barely run one of the Llama models or something. Now, maybe by 2028, we could have Fable-like capabilities in your house. Now that's maybe a bit delusional because I'm not so sure hardware will really get there. You need quite a lot of VRAM, but hey, meaningful progress will be made. I am sure of that. And what about in 10 years? It's going to be all of your tasks, all of the drudgery, maybe stuff that you currently do with Frontier models. And that's all just going to be here in your house on your local setup. And that's very exciting. Okay, thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any questions. Also comment what you use your local setup for. Hit me up on Discord if you want. I will see you guys in the next one. Love you. Take care. Bye.